Number 1. Michael Madison. Wondering what could make a father leap across a courtroom table even after a sentence had already been handed down, ignoring officers, the judge, and everyone watching. This is Michael Madison. And on May 5, 2016, a jury found him guilty on all 13 counts, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, assault, and abuse of a body. Just weeks later, on May 20, 2016, jurors recommended the death penalty. On June 2, 2016, Judge Nancy R. McDonnell formally sentenced him to death, a moment that would turn into one of the most emotional courtroom confrontations seen in Ohio. Michael Madison was born October 15, 1977, and grew up in East Cleveland under difficult circumstances marked by abuse during childhood. Years later, his name became known after a series of crimes that shook the community between 2012 and 2013. Police first responded on July 19, 2013, after neighbors reported a strong odor coming from a garage connected to Madison. Inside, officers discovered the decomposing body of a woman. Within a day, 2 more bodies were located nearby, each wrapped in plastic bags. Authorities soon identified the victims as 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely, 38-year-old Angela Deskins, and 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, a young woman last seen leaving a summer job at a local school. Investigators gathered evidence from Madison's apartment showing clear signs connected to the crimes. After a brief standoff at his mother's home, he was taken into custody without incident and charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder. Prosecutors later expanded the indictment to 14 counts, including kidnapping and abuse of bodies, while also revealing Madison had previously been registered as a offender following an earlier conviction. His trial began in April 2016. And jurors deliberated less than 1 day before returning guilty verdicts on every charge. Throughout proceedings, prosecutors said Madison showed no remorse, a detail that deeply affected the victims' families as they sat through testimony describing what their loved ones endured. When sentencing day arrived, families filled the courtroom carrying years of grief and unanswered pain. Sherelda Terry's father, Van Terry, approached the front to deliver a victim impact statement. He faced the man responsible for his daughter's loss, preparing to speak directly to him. As Terry turned toward Madison, witnesses later said the defendant gave what appeared to be a malicious smile. In that instant, something changed. Overcome with emotion, Terry lunged across the courtroom table toward Madison, attempting to reach him as deputies rushed forward. Officers quickly restrained him while Madison and his attorneys moved away from the sudden chaos unfolding only feet from the judge's bench. The moment spread across the country as many recognized it not as anger alone but as the breaking point of a grieving father. Prosecutors later explained that Madison's behavior in court had appeared taunting, saying the man responsible for such suffering seemed amused despite the devastation left behind. Years earlier, shortly after his daughter had been identified, Van Terry had said he did not even want the death penalty, believing Madison should live every day facing the consequences of what he had done. But standing in that courtroom, hearing the sentence made final, the weight of loss became overwhelming. Tears filled the room as deputies escorted Terry away, and the reality of the verdict settled over everyone present. Judge McDonnell confirmed the sentence, declaring that Michael Madison would face death for the crimes committed against the 3 women. The courtroom atmosphere shifted from chaos to silence as families embraced one another, some crying openly while others stared forward, exhausted after years of legal proceedings. Prosecutor Tim McGinty stated that if there was ever a person deserving of the ultimate punishment, it was Madison, pointing to the brutality of the crimes and the absence of remorse shown throughout the trial. In the years that followed, Madison's sentence was upheld by the Ohio Supreme Court in 2020, though later appeals delayed his scheduled execution. For Vanteri and the other families, the confrontation inside that courtroom remained one of the most powerful moments of the case, a raw expression of grief that words alone could not contain. It was not planned, and it was not calculated, but it showed how the pain carried by parents does not end when a verdict is read. Even after justice is announced, the heartbreak remains, echoing long after the courtroom doors close. Number 2, Brian Christopher Kohberger. This is Brian Christopher Kohberger, a criminology PhD student whose name became known across the country after 4 university students were found dead inside an off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. In the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle were attacked inside the quiet college town where violent crime was rare and the community felt safe. The 3-story house sat on a hillside with bedrooms spread across each level, and by 2 o'clock that morning everyone had returned home after a normal night out with friends, unaware that the calm routine of student life was about to change forever. Madison and Kaylee, both 21-year-old seniors and lifelong best friends, had gone to a downtown bar before stopping at a food truck and heading home shortly before 2 o'clock. Xana Kernodle, a 20-year-old marketing student, returned from a fraternity party with her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, also 20 years old and known for his close bond with his family and siblings. Investigators later believed the attacks happened between 4 o'clock and 4:25 that morning. A surviving roommate woke to noises she first thought were ordinary sounds inside the house, then heard someone say, "There is someone here." Moments later she heard crying and a male voice calmly saying, "It is okay, I'm going to help you." When she opened her door again, she saw a masked figure dressed in black walking past her toward the kitchen before disappearing into the night, leaving behind confusion and fear that would only make sense hours later. The next morning, attempts to reach the other roommates failed. Friends were called to the house for help, and a call to emergency services was placed, reporting an unconscious person. Officers soon discovered all 4 students inside the home. The news spread quickly through the university and the town, canceling classes and sending shock through families who struggled to understand how such violence could happen in a place that had not seen a murder in years. Vigils were planned as students left town early, afraid and uncertain, while investigators worked around the clock following thousands of tips from the public. Police focused on surveillance footage showing a white sedan driving repeatedly near the home during the early hours. Phone data later showed Brian Kohberger's device disconnecting from the network around the time investigators believed the attacks occurred before reconnecting miles away. DNA recovered from a knife sheath found at the scene became a turning point, eventually linking investigators to Kohberger after genealogical testing narrowed the search to his family line. Authorities monitored him at his parents' Pennsylvania home, observing unusual behavior before taking him into custody on December 30, 2022. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary and transported back to Idaho to face trial. Kohberger had studied psychology and criminal justice before beginning doctoral studies less than 8 miles from Moscow. Prosecutors initially pursued the death penalty, and the question of motive remained unanswered as court proceedings stretched on. In July 2025, Kohberger pleaded guilty to all charges, accepting 4 consecutive life sentences without parole and an additional 10 years for burglary. The plea guaranteed he would spend the rest of his life in prison, but for the families, sentencing day was not about legal outcomes alone, it was their moment to face him directly. Inside the courtroom, emotions that had built for years finally erupted. Kaylee Gonsalvez's father turned the podium toward Kohberger so he could speak straight to him, calling him a sociopath and mocking the mistakes that led investigators to his door. He told him that within minutes authorities had his DNA like a calling card and said the world cared about the victims, not about him. Kaylee's sister demanded answers that still haunted the families, asking where the weapon was, where the clothing from that night had gone, and what Kaylee's final words were. She called him careless and weak, saying he had targeted sleeping students because he could not face them awake. The courtroom reacted with loud emotion as grief and anger filled the space. Other family members followed, each carrying their own pain. Madison Mogen's grandmother spoke about how the foundation of their world collapsed and how dreams once shared by the young students were suddenly gone. Xana Kernodle's stepfather spoke through shaking hands, telling Kohberger he felt overwhelming anger yet restrained himself, hoping the weight of the moment reached him. Xana's aunt surprised many when she spoke calmly and said she had chosen forgiveness despite her grief. Throughout it all, Kohberger sat in an orange prison uniform, expression unchanged, showing no visible reaction as statement after statement was delivered directly toward him. When the judge offered him the chance to speak, Kohberger quietly declined. Moments later, the sentence was announced: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as families held one another, knowing the legal chapter had ended but their loss remained permanent. For them, confronting him face to face was not about revenge, but about reclaiming their voices, ensuring that the focus remained on Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana, 4 young lives remembered far beyond the walls of that courtroom. Number 3. Jeffrey Clark. This is Jeffrey Clark being attacked by the twin brother of his last victim in the courtroom. On July 4, 2022, at about 3 in the morning, Jeray Robertson was chased through a parking lot at Fraser Woods Apartments in Fraser, Michigan, and he begged for his life in the seconds before he was shot. The attack was caught on video with audio, and you can hear Robertson pleading, "Do not shoot, then the shots come fast." Prosecutors said Clark fired 7 times, with 9mm rounds striking Robertson in multiple places. They said one shot happened after Clark started to walk away, then he realized Robertson was still alive, stepped back, and fired again. Clark later claimed he acted in self-defense and said he believed Robertson had a gun. The conflict began after Robertson showed up at the apartment building of his former girlfriend, Tamara Scott. Scott had been dating Clark for about 8 months, and after a night that involved a party bus celebration, she returned to her apartment with Clark. Soon after, Robertson began banging on her window and damaging her car, and Clark chased him away. Scott and Clark got into her car. Then as they drove along 13 Mile Road, Clark saw Robertson on the sidewalk, pointed a gun at him, chased him into the Fraser apartment lot, and shot him. Scott called emergency services from a nearby gas station but did not say she witnessed the shooting. Clark fled on foot, later met up with Scott, and police arrested him after tracking the situation. Scott later testified and was convicted as an accessory after the fact. In court, prosecutors described it as an execution, and a relative testified that Clark talked about what happened and said Robertson begged for his life with no sign of regret. The video was played in court, and it hit the family hard. During an earlier hearing in district court, Robertson's twin brother Jerry attacked Clark in the courtroom after hearing the audio, and the situation turned into a chaotic fight with deputies rushing in and others getting involved. By the time the case reached trial, the courtroom was packed with deputies and officers, and the judge warned everyone that any illegal behavior would lead to detention. Families were escorted separately, and the victim's family was taken out using an alternate route. On July 4, 2023, a Macomb County jury convicted 33-year-old Jeffrey Clark of first-degree murder and 3 weapons charges for the shooting of 28-year-old Jeray Robertson. The jury deliberated less than 1 hour and rejected second-degree murder, which would have allowed parole. Clark showed little reaction as the verdict was read. As he was led out, he turned toward his supporters in the gallery, and a woman's voice said, "We love you." He now faces a sentence of life in prison without parole. Number 4, Ryan Burge. How do you think it feels to confront the person responsible for your child's loss just 3 days after it happened, before grief has even settled, before reality fully makes sense? This is Ryan Burge, and on November 2, 2018, 5-year-old Hartley Anderson was left in his care at an apartment in Vancouver, Washington, while her mother went to work and her siblings were at school. That evening, emergency responders arrived at the Madison Park apartments and found the little girl unconscious with severe head injuries. She was rushed to a hospital and later transferred to a children's hospital in Portland, where she did not survive. Burge told police the child hurt herself during a tantrum, but doctors quickly said the injuries were far too severe to have been self-inflicted. Investigators learned Burge had been in a relationship with Hartley's mother for only a few months and was trusted to babysit that day. Medical experts described massive brain swelling and trauma that could not have happened accidentally. Police arrested Burge and charged him with murder. As news spread, family and friends gathered around Hartley's loved ones, remembering her as a joyful child who loved everyone and was loved by everyone in return. Outside the courthouse, people wore shirts reading "Justice for Hartley," holding on to one another as they prepared to face the man accused of taking her future away. The first court appearance came only 3 days after the child's death, and the courtroom was filled beyond capacity with grieving relatives and supporters. When Burge entered wearing a suicide smock, family members began crying openly. Hartley's mother became overwhelmed the moment she saw him and collapsed, needing to be lifted and carried out of the courtroom as relatives tried to comfort her. The emotional weight in the room was heavy, and everyone watched closely as the proceedings began, knowing this was the first time they had seen him since losing the child. Then the tension reached its breaking point. Hartley's biological father, Peter Anderson, rushed forward toward Burge as he stood before the judge. Deputies immediately grabbed him and pulled him away, placing him in handcuffs in the hallway. He did not speak, but the pain was clear. Officers later explained that moments like this happen when families are forced to sit face to face with the person connected to their child's death. Order returned to the courtroom, but anger and heartbreak remained visible on every face. As Burge entered a not guilty plea, someone from the gallery shouted for justice, while others cried quietly. Outside the courthouse, the family gathered together, holding on to memories of Hartley and speaking about the life she would never get to live. Her grandfather said he would never see her graduate or get married, and that the joy she brought to their lives had been taken away. Relatives promised they would attend every hearing until justice was reached. The case moved forward as prosecutors argued Burge attacked the child during a moment of frustration, while the defense claimed the injuries came from her own behavior, a claim medical experts strongly rejected. In February 2020, a jury found Ryan Burge guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter, also determining that the crime involved a betrayal of trust and a vulnerable victim. During sentencing, Hartley's mother told the court she could not fully describe the impact her daughter's loss had on the family and everyone who loved her. Judge Jennifer Snyder said Burge had shown no real accountability, especially after choosing not to speak. He declined to make a statement, and the silence only deepened the pain felt inside the courtroom. Ryan Burge was sentenced to 40 years in prison, along with mandatory treatment programs and strict orders preventing contact with the family or young children. For Hartley's parents, confronting him so soon after losing their child became one of the hardest moments of the case, a moment where grief, anger, and love collided in front of the court. The sentence closed the legal chapter. But for the family, justice meant something different. Remembering a little girl whose life ended far too early and whose absence would be felt every single day. Number 5, Frank DeLeon Jr. This is Frank DeLeon being attacked in the courtroom by his young victim's grieving uncle. On January 11, 2022, 16-year-old Diamond Alvarez walked out to take the family dog near a park in southwest Houston, Texas, and she did not come back. The dog returned home alone. Her family ran outside, and they found Diamond in a field after she had been shot 22 times. Investigators said Diamond had learned Frank DeLeon Jr. was involved with another girl at the same time, and she agreed to meet him at the park that night. Police say that the meeting is where she was shot multiple times and left there. Detectives worked leads from the community and arrested DeLeon 6 days later, charging him with murder. He posted a $250,000 bond and was placed on house arrest. Then authorities arrested him again later for violating bond conditions, and he was released again. The case dragged on, and the family said the delays were draining them. When trial was set to begin, DeLeon failed to show up for court, his bond was forfeited, and a warrant was issued. His attorney later said he had been in a car crash on the way to court and suffered a serious head injury, and officials confirmed he was in custody at a hospital before being taken to jail. When the case reached sentencing, the courtroom turned into a storm of emotion. Diamond's mother, Anna Machado, stood up to give her impact statement and spoke directly about her daughter and the pain the family was living with. She called DeLeon a monster, and she said his mother in the gallery had raised him to be that way. As she spoke, the room tightened. People were crying, others were shaking, and the anger did not stay quiet. The moment her words landed, the tension snapped. Diamond's uncle, Gerardo Machado, rushed toward DeLeon and started punching him. It set off a courtroom brawl, with shouting, pushing, and deputies rushing in from every direction. The mothers of both DeLeon and Diamond also became involved in the chaos as officers tried to separate everyone. It took multiple deputies to pull the uncle back, and reports said a taser was used as they fought to regain control. The uncle was taken away in handcuffs, later facing a charge for interfering with a public servant. The fight was so distracting that in a separate case, a man managed to slip out of his leg restraint and walk out of the courthouse while deputies were focused on the brawl. After the outburst, Diamond's mother later spoke again and took responsibility for her part in what happened. She said it was wrong, and she apologized, saying it should never have happened. Even with that apology, the pain in the family did not soften, and the emotion in that courtroom showed how hard it was for them to sit in the same room with the person accused of taking Diamond's life. Frank DeLeon Jr. accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 45 years in prison, a sentence the family supported because it brought the case to an end without more delays. For Diamond's loved ones, the sentencing was not only about the number of years, it was about being heard, being seen, and standing up for a 16-year-old girl who loved dancing and makeup and had plans for cosmetology school. The case ended in court, but the moment her mother spoke and the family erupted showed how deep the loss still ran. Number 6, Nicolas Cruz. This is Nicolas Cruz, and on February 14, 2018, he walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and opened fire. 14 students and 3 staff members did not survive. 17 more were injured, and in minutes a normal school day turned into a nightmare that families would carry for the rest of their lives. Cruz was a former student, and after the attack he left the building and blended in with other students as they ran. He moved through the area on foot, and about 1 hour and 20 minutes later police arrested him nearby in Coral Springs without incident. Investigators said Cruz had a long history of behavioral problems, and he had been the subject of repeated concern at school and in the community. He was known for disturbing posts and comments online, and he had talked about violence and weapons more than once. He legally bought firearms before the attack, including an AR-style rifle purchased in February 2017, and after the attack authorities said he confessed. He told a psychologist he chose that date because he believed no one loved him, and he later pleaded guilty to 17 counts tied to the people who died and 17 counts tied to those who were injured, a plea that brought families into a long sentencing process where they would finally be allowed to speak directly to him in court. By the time the sentencing phase ended, a jury recommended life in prison instead of death, and that decision hit the victims and families hard because many of them wanted the harshest punishment. In November 2022, Judge Elizabeth Scherer sentenced Cruz to life in prison without parole. And what followed were some of the most intense moments of grief ever seen in a courtroom, not because the judge could change the outcome, but because the families had one chance to put their pain into words while he sat there and listened. One parent stood and spoke with a kind of quiet fury, saying they hoped every moment of his life would be miserable and that he would repent. Then they looked past the years and said one day he would die, whether it was soon or decades from now, and they described their hope that nothing about his end would bring comfort. Another family member, Linda Beagle Schulman, the mother of Scott Bagel, the teacher who helped protect students that day, told the court she learned how long death penalty cases can take and said she might not even live to see an execution. Then she turned it into something else. She said he was going to a maximum security prison, where he would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, afraid in every minute, surrounded by people tougher than him, a place that would make the jail feel easy by comparison. The statements kept coming, and some of them were directed not only at Cruz but at the defense team, because the families felt the jury had been pushed toward life. Max Schachter, the father of Alex Schachter, spoke to the defense and accused them of making the mental health crisis worse by how they described Cruz. He said Cruz had access to services and medication for years, and the problem was not that help was missing, it was that nothing changed what he was. Then he turned back toward the facts of the day and described the fear inside the school, making it clear he believed this was the worst of the worst and that the outcome did not match what the families felt was deserved. Manuel Oliver, the father of Joaquin Oliver, brought another layer of tension when he addressed a moment involving the defense and a camera in court, and he made it personal, directing anger toward them as well as the man who carried out the attack. That is when the courtroom atmosphere shifted again, because the defense objected and asked the judge to stop the families from aiming their statements at them. Judge Scherer responded sharply, telling a defense lawyer they were out of line and ordering them to move to the back of the room, and the exchange itself showed how raw everything had become. Not only grief and rage from families, but strain inside the courtroom as everyone tried to hold the line between procedure and emotion. Other parents spoke about the day in detail, the hours of searching for their child, the confusion, the wrong information, the moment they realized the truth, and how their family was sent from place to place while their loved one was gone. One mother, Ann Ramsey, described losing her daughter on her birthday and how they were made to wait for hours listening to the screams of other families, and she talked about the way that experience changed how she saw everything around her. including how different families were treated and how heavy that realization felt on top of the loss itself. When it was time for the judge to finalize the sentence, she acknowledged the families, she spoke about their restraint and how united they were, and she told them that seeing them together made her believe they would get through it because they had each other. Then she imposed life without parole, and Cruz was led away. In a final moment that showed the strange contrast of that day, the victims and families stayed behind and waited in line to hug the judge, not because it fixed anything, but because they had survived the process of sitting in the same room with the person responsible, and they had said what they needed to say directly, out loud, with the whole world listening. Number 7. Mitchell Savickas and Daniel Benavides. This is the mother of Isaiah Blue tearfully confronting her son's killers in the courtroom. We have Mitchell Savickas and Daniel Benavides, and on January 27, 2016, 17-year-old Isaiah Blue stepped off a public bus in Wyoming, Michigan, unaware he was being followed. Prosecutors said the two teens planned to rob him near the intersection of 44th Street and Division Avenue. Savickas confronted Isaiah and fired a rifle, striking him once in the chest and then 3 more times in the back as the teenager tried to run across the street. Isaiah collapsed and died from his injuries. Police later confirmed he was unarmed. Investigators learned the boys knew each other from time spent in juvenile detention and that there had been tension between them. Savickas represented himself during trial and claimed he acted in self-defense, telling jurors he believed Isaiah was armed and feared for his life. Evidence showed otherwise, and Savickas admitted he never actually saw a weapon. The jury deliberated less than 30 minutes before finding him guilty of felony murder. Benavides, who carried a non-working gun during the robbery, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to accept responsibility for his role. At sentencing, Isaiah's mother, Clarissa Seaton, stood before both teenagers and read directly from a letter she prepared for them. Looking at Savickas, she called him a coward and told him he would now have to face real men without a gun. She said that despite the pain she carried, she prayed he would receive the mercy he never showed her son when he fired at him as he ran away. Her voice broke as she spoke about losing her child only 2 days after his birthday, and the courtroom remained silent as family members filled every seat behind her. Turning toward Benavides, Seaton's tone changed. She told him she felt sorry for him because he was too young to be standing in a courtroom facing decades in prison. She said he had not only stolen from her family but also from himself and from those who loved him. She urged him to use his time behind bars to learn and change his life. Before hearing his sentence, Benavides apologized directly to Isaiah's family, saying he did not expect forgiveness and never intended for Isaiah to lose his life that night. When given the chance to speak, Savickas refused to address the family at all. The judge sentenced Mitchell Savickas to life in prison without parole and Daniel Benavides to 20 to 40 years in prison, plus additional time for a firearm charge. As the sentences were read, Isaiah Blue's family remained focused on the young man they lost, confronting his murderers face to face so his voice could still be heard inside the courtroom. For his mother, the moment was not only about punishment, but about speaking directly to the people who made a decision that ended her son's future at a bus stop after school. Number 8. Chavez Ocasio. On number 8 of this countdown we have Chavez Ocasio, and on April 11, 2021, gunfire erupted from a moving car in Syracuse, New York, leading to the death of 18-month-old Dior Harris. The shooting happened during a drive-by attack on Grant Avenue when multiple shots were fired into a vehicle carrying women and children. Dior was sitting inside when the bullet struck the car. She did not survive, and 2 young relatives were injured. Surveillance footage later showed shots coming from a blue 2003 Honda Accord registered to Ocasio, leading to his arrest the very next day. Investigators determined Ocasio was driving while his friend Jesse Outley sat in the vehicle and fired the shots. Ocasio was originally charged with murder and weapons offenses and pleaded not guilty. Nearly 2 years later, he accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to attempted murder and criminal possession of a weapon. In exchange, he agreed to testify against Outley, telling jurors he was behind the wheel when Outley opened fire, claiming he did not know children were inside the targeted car. His testimony became a central part of the prosecution's case. During court proceedings, Dior's family filled the courtroom wearing shirts with her image, showing the pain they carried since losing a child who had barely begun life. When Ocasio stood before the judge for sentencing, emotions broke through the silence. Dior's father spoke directly toward him, repeating that he had taken his daughter away and questioning how 15 years in prison could ever equal the loss of a child. His voice rose as he said, "You took my baby from me," promising that the memory of Dior would never fade and that the pain would remain long after the sentence ended. Judge Gordon Cuffey sentenced Chavez Ocasio to 15 years in prison, as agreed under the plea deal. He will be in his mid-30s when released. The courtroom remained tense as family members reacted to the outcome, struggling with the difference between legal justice and personal loss. Ocasio's cooperation helped secure the conviction of Jesse Outley, who was later found guilty on all counts connected to the shooting and sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. For Dior's parents, confronting those involved face-to-face was one of the hardest moments of the case. They stood only feet away from the people connected to their daughter's death, wearing her image across their shirts as a reminder of who this case was truly about. Number 9. Andy Gonzalez. On May 5, 2017, 23-year-old DeAndre Bullis was standing outside a barbershop on Granville Avenue in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when gunfire suddenly erupted in broad daylight. Prosecutors said Gonzalez approached and opened fire during an ongoing dispute, shooting Bullis in what investigators described as an execution-style attack. Bullis, a father of 2 young boys, was unarmed. His cousin, Manuel Villarreal, was also shot and injured but survived. Witnesses watched as the violence unfolded in the middle of the afternoon, leaving a family shattered within seconds. A jury later found Gonzalez guilty of second-degree murder and attempted murder. During the original sentencing in 2018, the judge handed down a massive punishment of 65.5 to 100 years in prison, explaining that the severity reflected the violent nature of the crime. Bullis's family filled the courtroom wearing shirts with his image, determined to face the man responsible. Gonzalez showed little emotion as the victim's mother stood and confronted him directly, calling him a coward and demanding to know why her son had been taken from her. In court, Bullis's mother spoke through anger and grief, telling Gonzalez that her grandchildren would grow up without their father because of his actions. She said he ruined not only her life but the lives of 2 young boys who would never again see their dad. She shouted that he chose a gun because he could not fight like a man and told him she hoped he would suffer for the rest of his life. At one point she said, "Why did you kill my baby?" Her words echoed through the courtroom as Gonzalez remained silent and refused to address the family. Years later, the Michigan Court of Appeals ruled that the original sentence had been influenced partly by Gonzalez choosing to go to trial instead of taking a plea deal, which violated his constitutional rights. The case returned to court for a new sentencing hearing. Bullis's fiancée, Sandra Bravo, told the judge it was unfair that a technical issue could reduce the punishment, explaining how difficult it was trying to raise their children while constantly answering why their father was gone. She asked the court to keep the original sentence in place. On July 14, 2021, Judge Paul Denenfeld re-sentenced Gonzalez to 35 to 52.5 years in prison, calling the shooting an extremely violent attack and warning that gun violence had become an epidemic in the community. The judge said the sentence needed to send a message that anyone who chooses to shoot another person will pay a heavy price. Gonzalez will now be eligible for parole when he is nearly 60 years old, while DeAndre Bullis's family continues serving a life sentence of their own without him. Number 10. Jared Chance. This is Jared Chance, and on September 13, 2019, he was convicted of second-degree murder after the disappearance of 31-year-old Ashley Young turned into one of the most disturbing cases in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Ashley had been preparing to start a new chapter in her life after ending a relationship and planning to move into her own apartment. On November 28, 2018, she told her mother she was heading to meet someone, but she never arrived at her destination. That message became the last contact her family ever received from her. Investigators learned Ashley had reconnected with Chance, a former acquaintance, who asked her to meet him that night. Surveillance video later showed the two together at a local bar before leaving separately, with Ashley following behind him. Days later, a strong odor coming from the basement of an apartment building led police to a horrifying discovery. Inside the basement, officers found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The upstairs tenant was Jared Chance. Evidence inside his apartment showed signs of a violent struggle and an attempted cleanup, while additional remains were discovered hidden inside containers. Ashley's head, hands, and feet were never recovered. Police arrested Chance after surveillance footage captured him buying cleaning supplies shortly after Ashley vanished and discarding her purse in a nearby dumpster. Phone records placed him traveling to his parents' home, where investigators later recovered a blood-stained shower curtain and a saw containing biological material. His parents were also arrested for helping move evidence after the crime. Chance initially faced charges related to mutilation and concealing a crime, but as forensic evidence confirmed the remains belonged to Ashley, prosecutors added murder charges. During the trial, Chance showed little emotion as prosecutors outlined how Ashley trusted him and how that trust ended in violence. The jury deliberated only a short time before finding him guilty. When sentencing day arrived, Ashley's mother, Christine Young, walked into court carrying a box that held her daughter's ashes and placed it beside her as she prepared to speak. Facing Chance directly, she said she cried every day and told him he had discarded her daughter like trash. She shouted through tears, saying she hated him and wished she could tear him apart for what he had done. The courtroom fell silent as Christine described, closing her eyes and pretending her daughter was still hugging her. Chance remained stone-faced while she spoke, offering no explanation and never revealing where the rest of Ashley's remains were hidden. The judge then sentenced Jared Chance to 100 to 200 years in prison, stating he should not be eligible for parole until he was well over a century old. As deputies led him away, Ashley's family was left with answers to the crime but still searching for the missing pieces needed to finally bring her fully home. Number 11. LaCynthia Tidmore. This is LaCynthia Tidmore, and on November 9, 2017, she was convicted in connection with the hit-and-run that took the life of 9-year-old Desire Mays in Euclid, Ohio. That morning, Desire was walking to catch her school bus along Babbitt Road when she was struck by a vehicle while trying to get to school. Construction had closed parts of the sidewalk, forcing children closer to the roadway. After the collision, the driver did not stop and continued driving away, leaving the child critically injured in the street. Desire was rushed to the hospital where she fought for her life for 15 days before passing away from her injuries. Police quickly located the damaged vehicle at a nearby gas station, and hours later Tidmore turned herself in. Investigators said the impact was severe and impossible to miss. Prosecutors later revealed that after the crash she stopped for gas and even joked about the damage to her car before contacting authorities. Desire had suffered devastating injuries including a broken neck and extensive facial trauma. The case shocked the community, especially after it was revealed the young girl was a straight-A student on her way to school when everything changed. During court proceedings, Desire's mother faced the woman responsible and described the injuries her daughter endured. She told the courtroom her child's neck was broken and nearly every bone in her face had been shattered. She said it was the first day she allowed her daughter to walk anywhere alone, and she could not understand how the driver failed to stop after the impact. Fighting through emotion, she explained that she kept her daughter on life support for days before making the painful decision to donate her organs to help save another child. At one point in court, the grieving mother became overwhelmed after seeing Tidmore smiling, saying she felt mocked by the person who caused her daughter's death. She spoke directly to her, asking how someone could leave a child behind and continue driving without looking back. The courtroom grew silent as she described stopping her entire life to protect her daughter, only to now sit face to face with the person she believed took everything from her. Tidmore later pleaded guilty to aggravated vehicular homicide and failure to stop after an accident. In May 2018, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the law, along with a lifetime driver's license, suspension, and probation upon release. An appeals court briefly overturned the sentence on technical grounds, but after resentencing, the same 8-year term was imposed again. While the legal process concluded, Desire's family and community continued honoring her memory, remembering a young girl whose life while simply trying to get to school. Number 12, Aramazd Andresian Sr. At number 13 of this countdown we have Aramazd Andresian Sr., and on April 21, 2017, prosecutors say he carried out one of the most heartbreaking acts imaginable. He brutally murdered his 5-year-old son, Aramazd Andresian Jr., known lovingly as Piki. The crime unfolded after what appeared to be a normal family outing to Disneyland during a bitter divorce and custody battle between Andresian and the boy's mother, Ana Estevez. Investigators later revealed that after leaving the park, the father drove his son away instead of returning him home. Somewhere along that drive, inside his vehicle, Andresian smothered the child using the boy's own jacket. Authorities believe the act was deliberate and fueled by anger toward his estranged wife during their escalating separation. After the child's death, Andresian sat inside the car with his son's body for nearly 8 hours before driving to a remote wooded area near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. There, he buried the boy in an isolated location. The next morning, he was discovered passed out inside a car soaked in gasoline in what investigators described as a failed self-hurt attempt involving prescription pills. When questioned about his son's whereabouts, he gave inconsistent answers, triggering an intense search effort across Southern California as the young boy was officially reported missing. Initially arrested and later released due to insufficient evidence, Andresian shocked investigators by traveling to Las Vegas, where he spent weeks socializing, attending events, and changing his appearance by dyeing his hair and shaving his beard. Authorities believed he was preparing to flee the country. After 47 days, he was arrested again and brought back to California. During questioning, Andresian eventually confessed and directed investigators to the burial site. On June 30, 2017, the remains of young Piki were finally located near the lake, ending a nationwide search that had captured public attention. Prosecutors argued the crime was an ultimate act of revenge against the child's mother, while the defense claimed the death was not planned. Facing overwhelming evidence and the possibility of a death penalty case, Andresian pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in Los Angeles County Superior Court. The plea came without any negotiated sentence, meaning the judge alone would decide his fate. Investigators later revealed details of the murder publicly for the first time, confirming how the boy had died and describing the case as deeply disturbing even for seasoned detectives. The sentencing hearing took place inside a packed Alhambra courtroom filled with supporters wearing shirts reading "Justice for Piqui." The boy's mother sat in the front row holding an urn containing her son's ashes. When she rose to speak, emotion quickly filled the room. She described her loss as cataclysmic devastation and said her life had been shattered forever. She spoke about the milestones she would never witness, never seeing her son start kindergarten, graduate, or fall in love someday. Her grief soon turned into direct confrontation as she faced Andresian and told him she pitied him, calling him a failure as a father, a man, and a human being. She said she wished she had been taken instead of her child, and told him she hoped he would relive what he had done every day for the rest of his life. The courtroom remained silent as she spoke, while Andresian showed little reaction. When given the chance to address the court, he chose to remain silent after learning any statement would be made under oath and subject to questioning. Judge Catherine Brougham then delivered the sentence, 25 years to life in state prison. Because no special circumstances were attached to the charge after the guilty plea, the death penalty was not pursued. The judge ordered restitution and formally closed one of the most emotionally devastating cases to pass through the court. As deputies escorted Andresian away, Ana Estevez later thanked investigators and supporters who helped keep her son's story alive, saying despite everything, her son was now living a glorious life in heaven, while she continues carrying the weight of a loss no parent should ever endure. Number 13, Danta Wright. This is Danta Wright smiling in the courtroom after he admitted to murdering 18-year-old high school senior Jordan Klee during a failed armed robbery in Ann Arbor, Michigan. On October 4, 2016, Klee, a pioneer high school football player and scholar athlete, was supposed to be in class when his life was suddenly cut short. Instead, he was found with a gunshot wound at the Pine Lake Village apartments discovered by a maintenance worker. Investigators later revealed that Wright and two accomplices planned to rob Klee at gunpoint, turning what began as a robbery into a fatal shooting. During a court hearing, Wright shocked the courtroom when he openly confessed to the crime. Prosecutors asked him directly what happened during the robbery attempt. Wright calmly answered that he shot Jordan Klee in the head and confirmed that the shot murdered him. The admission ended months of uncertainty for the victim's family but replaced it with the painful reality of hearing the details spoken aloud by the person responsible. Police confirmed the murder occurred during the attempted robbery carried out by Wright along with Delreno Gracie and Jermarius Ellison. The courtroom became emotionally charged as Klee's family delivered victim impact statements. A message read on behalf of his grieving mother described losing her only child, her best friend, and the future she had imagined, including grandchildren and family milestones that would never happen. While family members cried, Wright sat smiling and appeared to laugh, behavior that stunned those present. When given the chance to speak, he told the courtroom, "I just want to tell y'all I'll be home soon. I love my family," a statement that intensified anger and disbelief among the victim's relatives. Judge David Swartz immediately reacted to Wright's attitude, stopping proceedings and warning that he was close to rejecting the plea agreement altogether. The judge stated that watching Wright smile and act as though the case meant nothing made him consider sending the case to trial, where a felony murder conviction could result in life in prison without release. After a recess, Jordan Klee's family chose not to pursue a trial, saying they wanted closure instead of prolonging the pain. Wright was ultimately sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison for second-degree murder, armed robbery, and felony firearm charges, with an additional mandatory 2-year firearm sentence. His accomplices, Delreno Gracie and Jermarius Ellison, also pleaded guilty and later received sentences of 15 to 40 years. Jordan Klee, remembered as a talented student, football athlete, and aspiring engineer, should have been preparing for graduation and a future ahead, but his life ended in a robbery that lasted only moments and left a family facing a lifetime without him. Number 14, Dennis Alsip Jr. At number 14 of this countdown we have Dennis Alsip Jr., and on July 16, 2012, a tragic crash on State Route 128 in Whitewater Township, Ohio, changed multiple lives forever. Investigators said 20-year-old Alsip lost control of his Ford Explorer while driving under the influence of alcohol. His vehicle crossed the center line and slammed head-on into a car driven by 22-year-old Lisa Hastings. The impact was devastating. Hastings suffered severe injuries and fought for her life in the hospital for 6 days before she passed away. Authorities determined alcohol played a major role in the crash, and Alsip was later charged with aggravated vehicular homicide. He accepted a plea deal and admitted responsibility for the collision. Prosecutors described the crash as entirely preventable, saying the decision to drive while impaired led directly to the young woman's death. The case deeply affected the small community, where both the victim and the defendant were known locally. During sentencing, the courtroom was filled with Lisa Hastings' family and friends wearing matching shirts in her memory. Her mother stood before the court holding large photographs showing her daughter before the crash and the injuries she suffered afterward. Although Alsip read a short apology letter, family members said they believed he showed little genuine remorse. Emotions rose as Lisa's mother addressed him directly, describing the pain her family now lived with every day. Through tears and anger, she told Alsip she wished he would experience the same suffering he caused, and said society no longer needed someone who made such a reckless choice. Her statement captured the grief of a mother forced to bury her child because of a preventable decision. The emotional confrontation left the courtroom silent as the judge prepared to announce the punishment. The judge sentenced Dennis Alsip Jr. to 8 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed for aggravated vehicular homicide under state law. Later appeals arguing that his plea was not voluntary were rejected and the sentence was upheld. While the legal process ended, Lisa Hastings' family continued advocating for stronger penalties in impaired driving cases, hoping no other family would endure the same loss caused by one moment of reckless driving. Number 15, Lukache Kendall. This is the video of a grieving father confronting of a former armed security guard who murdered his son after a late-night encounter in a Miami, Florida nightclub parking lot and left another victim permanently paralyzed. On the night of June 1, 2012, Kendall arrived for his shift at Club Lex, a strip club where he worked security, wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a Glock pistol issued under his armed guard license. Just minutes before 11 o'clock, what began as an ordinary start to a work shift turned into a confrontation that prosecutors would later describe as completely unnecessary and devastating in its outcome. Kijuan Bird and Michael Smathers had spent the evening inside the club watching a basketball game and playing pool before returning to Smathers' truck in the parking lot. The two men sat talking while preparing to leave when Kendall parked beside them. According to investigators, there had been no prior conflict between the men. Kendall later claimed he felt threatened when the truck doors opened as he approached his vehicle, believing the men were advancing toward him. Smathers told a different story, saying no threats were made and that the encounter changed instantly when Kendall drew his weapon and began firing toward the truck without warning. At approximately 10:53 that night, multiple gunshots echoed across the parking lot. Kendall fired repeatedly into the vehicle, striking both men. Bird suffered multiple gunshot wounds, including wounds to his back as he attempted to crawl underneath a nearby vehicle for safety. Smathers was hit several times and survived, but was left paralyzed from the waist down. Emergency responders arrived to find Bird deceased at the scene while Kendall remained nearby, telling officers he acted in self-defense. No weapons were found on either victim, a detail that quickly became central to the investigation. Initially, Kendall was not arrested, as he invoked Florida's Stand Your Ground law and claimed he feared for his life. Over the following week, detectives reviewed witness accounts, forensic evidence, and medical findings that contradicted his version of events. Ballistic analysis showed continued gunfire even as the victims attempted to retreat. After public pressure from Bird's family and mounting evidence, authorities arrested Kendall on June 8, 2012, charging him with second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. The case soon became complicated by repeated competency hearings, hospital evaluations, and delays that stretched the legal process for years before trial. During court proceedings, emotions inside the courtroom reached a breaking point. As attorneys debated Kendall's mental competency and whether he should remain in a treatment facility, Kewan Bird's father suddenly stood up from the gallery, overcome with grief. He shouted that his son was gone forever and demanded justice, saying his son had been trying to get away when the shots continued. Court officers quickly escorted him out as he cried that Kendall had not been ill when the shooting happened and should face prison rather than treatment. Throughout the outburst, Kendall remained seated, watching silently as the pain of the victim's family unfolded in front of him. Kendall later chose to represent himself at trial, arguing that he believed deadly force was necessary and attempting to convince jurors that he had faced an imminent threat. Prosecutors countered with testimony from Smathers, eyewitness accounts, and forensic evidence showing the victims were unarmed and attempting to leave. After a week-long trial in September 2015, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding him guilty on both counts, rejecting his self-defense claim entirely. At sentencing, the judge described the shooting as an unjustified escalation carried out by someone entrusted with responsibility as an armed security guard. Kendall received life imprisonment for the murder of Kewan Bird, with a mandatory minimum term attached to the firearm enhancement, along with a concurrent 30-year sentence for the attempted murder of Michael Smathers. Appeals later challenged procedural issues but were denied, leaving the conviction intact. Today, Kendall remains incarcerated, while for Bird's family, the moment his father stood in court and confronted the man responsible became a lasting reminder that behind every verdict stands a family still searching for peace after loss. Number 16. Christopher Greger. This is Christopher Greger, a New Jersey father whose name became known after his 6-year-old son, Corey Micciolo, died, and prosecutors said the child's death was the result of chronic abuse. What made this case impossible to forget was not only the medical evidence, but the video the jury saw with their own eyes. On March 20, 2021, surveillance footage from the fitness center at Greger's apartment complex captured Corey running on a treadmill while his father stood beside him and repeatedly increased the speed, pushing the boy beyond what he could handle. The child stumbled, fell, tried to get back up, and fell again, over and over, as Greger grabbed him by the shirt and forced him to keep going, turning a place meant for exercise into a scene of punishment. 2 weeks later, on April 2, 2021, Greger brought Corey to the hospital, saying the boy had woken from a nap, stumbling, slurring his words, nauseous, and struggling to breathe. Corey was taken for a CT scan, but his condition rapidly collapsed. He began having seizures, and despite life-saving efforts, he could not be saved. The autopsy described blunt force injuries with contusions to the heart and liver, along with inflammation and sepsis. And at first, the manner of death was listed as undetermined. Months later, a consulting forensic pathologist reviewed the case and concluded the manner of death was homicide, pointing to a traumatic injury to the heart and patterns of blunt impact injuries to the chest and abdomen, including damage to the heart and liver that supported the state's claim of ongoing abuse. The investigation split into two clear tracks: the treadmill episode and the day Corey died. Authorities first arrested Gregor on July 7, 2021, for endangering the welfare of a child connected to the treadmill incident. He was later released under New Jersey bail reform. The murder case came later, and Gregor was arrested again on March 9, 2022, this time tied directly to Corey's death. Prosecutors argued the treadmill video was not a one-off mistake, but a window into what Corey endured, and they said the fatal injuries were delivered while Corey was in Gregor's care. The defense pushed back hard, hiring its own consulting expert and arguing Corey's was natural, blaming complications from pneumonia and infection rather than violence. At trial, the treadmill footage became the image jurors could not escape because it showed control, escalation, and a child repeatedly failing while an adult refused to stop. The state's experts testified the injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma and could not be explained away as accident or routine medical intervention. The defense attempted to create doubt by pointing to infection and sepsis and by suggesting resuscitation efforts could have contributed to internal injuries. In the end, the jury rejected the murder charge but convicted Gregor of aggravated manslaughter and endangering the welfare of a child, a verdict that still meant the jurors believed Corey's end came from harm, not nature. Sentencing on August 2, 2024, brought the moment Corey's mother had been waiting for, because the courtroom finally became a place where the pain could not be argued with or cross-examined. Judge Guy Ryan said he had received hundreds of letters from across the country, and he explained that while Corey's family wanted the maximum, the top sentence allowed would not survive appeal if imposed in the way they requested. He sentenced Gregor to 20 years for aggravated manslaughter and 5 years for endangering, stacked consecutively for a total of 25 years. The judge also spoke directly about the treadmill video, calling it brutal to watch, and treated the endangering charge as its own act, separate from what happened on the day Corey died. Corey's mother, Brianna Micciolo, stood up and turned the courtroom into Corey's voice. She described meeting Gregor when she was 16 and said she was manipulated and harmed, and that Corey's life began from that trauma but became her entire world. She told the judge she had worked to rebuild her life and become clean and sober, and she rejected the idea that her past could ever be used to excuse what happened to her son. She said Gregor showed no real remorse and that any apology was for himself, not for Corey. Then she took the court through April 2nd, saying she dropped Corey off with fear she still cannot forgive herself for, and later got a call that Corey was very sick, followed by silence as Gregor stopped answering while she searched hospitals trying to find her child. She described the moment police came to her door and told her Corey had died, and how her mind fought the truth because Corey had been alive and well only hours earlier. She said Gregor did not tell her where Corey was, and she believes he stole her chance to say goodbye. She told the court she believes Corey suffered for hours and that even at the hospital, Gregor showed no urgency, then left and drove away instead of staying. She described living with the replay of Corey's final day every morning and every night, The dread of being asked how many children she has, and the weight of telling people her 6-year-old was killed by his father. She spoke about taking her young daughter to the cemetery and the permanent fear that grief has carved into her life, ending with a plea for the strongest sentence possible because Corey's future, his childhood, and decades of life were taken from him. Gregor addressed the court too, but he denied causing Corey's, apologizing only for the treadmill incident while insisting he did nothing to cause Corey's passing. The prosecutor answered that Corey was abused, that his life was, and that Gregor left his child behind at the hospital in the final moments. When the sentence was imposed, the number itself could not restore what was lost. But the courtroom finally recorded in plain terms what the jury believed: Corey Micciolo's end was not an accident of nature, and his father would pay for it with decades of his own life behind bars. Number 17, Scott Paul Schweikert. This is Scott Paul Schweikert, a Tampa, Florida man who would later be convicted in a case that exposed a dark pattern of giving them illegal substances to make them unconscious and assaulting men, ending with 2 fatal murders in December of 2003. Prosecutors said Schweikert worked alongside Stephen Lorenzo and that the 2 men met online and bonded over violent fantasies involving bondage, control, and torture. What followed, authorities said, was not a single incident, but a deliberate routine to meet victims in gay nightclubs, gain their trust, lure them to Lorenzo's home, give them GHB, and then assault them while they were helpless. On the night of December 19, 2003, 26-year-old Jason Galehouse went out with friends to a Christmas party, then continued on to another gay nightclub. Later, after briefly returning home, he went back out again. At some point that night, Jason told his friends to leave without him. Investigators said he followed Schweikert and Lorenzo back to Lorenzo's house, believing it was just another late-night stop. That decision became the last time Jason was ever seen alive. Authorities would later say he was assaulted and tortured inside the house, and that his life was there. His body was never recovered, and the fact that his remains were never returned to his family became one of the deepest wounds in the entire case. The very next day, December 20th, another 26-year-old man, Michael Wachholz, was lured the same way. Police said he met Lorenzo and Schweikert at a gay nightclub and was brought back to Lorenzo's home. Like Jason, Michael was allegedly drugged with GHB and assaulted, and then his life was. 17 days later, his highly decomposed body was found inside a Jeep abandoned at an apartment complex in Hillsborough County, Florida. For Michael's family, that discovery confirmed their worst fear. For investigators, it connected the 2 cases into something far more terrifying than a single disappearance. Authorities said Jason and Michael were not the only victims. Court records and testimony described 7 more men who said they lost consciousness after drinks they believed were spiked, then woke up naked, disoriented, and violated. Some remembered being tied up. One victim, a 29-year-old bartender, later described waking up bound and assaulted. Another, a 19-year-old foreign exchange student, said he remembered an electrical charge sensation in his legs before losing control. Another man said he was bound with plastic ties and assaulted for hours. Their identities were kept private, but their accounts formed a consistent pattern that prosecutors said proved this was a sustained spree, not a misunderstanding and not consensual. The case first moved through federal court because the illegal substance element made it a federal matter. Stephen Lorenzo was arrested in February 2005, and Schweikert was arrested in May 2005. In federal court, Lorenzo was convicted of multiple counts tied to distributing illegal substances for the purpose of committing assaults, and the judge described what investigators found as a veritable chamber of horrors. Lorenzo was sentenced to 200 years in federal prison. Schweikert was convicted on a federal charge connected to the drugging and assault of Michael Wachholz and was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Even then, the story was not over, because Florida still had the murder cases waiting. Years later, both men faced state murder charges. Schweikert was brought back first, and prosecutors said they were prepared to pursue the death penalty against him. But on June 9, 2016, Schweikert pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, a move that spared him from a possible death sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison, and as part of that plea, he agreed to testify against Lorenzo when Lorenzo's state murder case finally reached its end. It meant Schweikert would never walk free again under Florida's murder sentence, even though he was still serving the lengthy federal time first. Inside the courtroom, the families finally had the moment they had been waiting for years. The grief did not sound polite. It sounded raw, furious, and exhausted. Jason Galehouse's mother spoke about what it meant to live without a body, without a grave, without a place to bring flowers and say goodbye. Her words were not measured because the loss was not measurable. After listening to details about how her son's life was and how his remains were disposed of, she told the men in front of her that she was sick from having to even look at them, and she made it clear that the sentence could never equal what was taken. For her, the punishment was not closure. It was simply the court finally acknowledging what her family had been forced to live with. Schweikert's plea and life sentence became one part of a much longer legal timeline that stretched into the next decade. Lorenzo, already serving his federal sentence, was eventually extradited back to Florida to face the murder charges. He pleaded guilty, and in February 2023, a Hillsborough County judge sentenced Stephen Lorenzo to death for the murders of Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholz. As of 2026, Lorenzo remains on Florida's death row, with court activity continuing around his appeals and his stated desire to waive further challenges. But for the families, the most haunting detail never changed. 2 young men went out for an ordinary night in Tampa, and they never made it home because 2 predators turned trust into a trap and a night out into a permanent disappearance. Number 18, Dejan Brown. This is Dejan Brown, a Cincinnati, Ohio man whose case left a community shaken after a young mother and her young child disappeared in December 2020. On December 5, 2020, 29-year-old Nitasha Lattimore was inside her Walnut Hills apartment, a place where she had allowed Brown, her former partner, to stay despite their relationship ending. Prosecutors later said that inside that apartment, Brown attacked Nitasha and stabbed her 11 times in the neck. The violence did not end there. By the next morning, the tragedy expanded into something even more devastating for her family. In the early hours of December 6, 2020, Brown placed 3-year-old Nilo Lattimore into a stroller and walked toward the Purple People Bridge, which stretches across the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Kentucky. According to prosecutors, the child was still alive when Brown threw both the stroller and the toddler into the icy river below. Massive searches followed in the days and weeks after, but Nilo's body was never recovered. The only item eventually found was the stroller, discovered in the water, leaving the family without the chance to properly lay the child to rest. Days later, on December 11th, Brown ordered a body bag online and placed Nitasha's remains inside it. He called an Uber and traveled back to the same bridge, lying to the driver about what was inside the bag. Prosecutors said he attempted to throw the remains into the river just as he had done before, but the bag became stuck on a ledge. The following day, a security guard discovered it, bringing a horrifying end to the search for Nitasha while deepening the mystery surrounding Nilo. Investigators later revealed that Brown had kept her body inside the apartment for days and searched online for ways to clean blood from the scene. The case moved slowly through the courts as questions about Brown's mental competency delayed proceedings. Eventually, psychologists testified that he had been pretending to show symptoms of mental illness, and he was ruled competent to stand trial. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Brown pleaded guilty on September 10, 2025, to 2 counts of aggravated murder. In exchange, the death penalty was removed, sparing Natasha's family years of appeals. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and declined to speak during the hearing. Inside the courtroom, grief turned into raw emotion when Nilo's father, Tonio Hughes, came face to face with the man accused of destroying his family. During a court hearing in 2022, Hughes suddenly rushed forward and struck Brown repeatedly before court officers pulled him away and restrained him. The outburst lasted only moments, but it captured the unbearable weight carried by a parent who had lost both a partner and a child. Hughes was later charged with contempt of court and briefly jailed, though many watching understood the pain behind his actions. During sentencing, Natasha's father, Roderick Lattimore, stood before the court demanding answers that would never come, especially about what happened to his grandson whose body was never found. Speaking directly toward Brown, he expressed his anger and heartbreak, telling him to go where he deserved to go and condemning the suffering left behind. When the sentence was finally announced, the courtroom fell quiet. Brown was led away to spend the rest of his life in prison. Number 19. Adam Montgomery. This is Adam Montgomery, a New Hampshire father whose name became widely known after the disappearance and murder of his young daughter, Harmony Renee Montgomery, a 6-year-old girl whose life became the center of national attention years after she was last seen alive. Harmony was born on June 7, 2014, and spent much of her early childhood in foster care before a Massachusetts judge awarded custody to her father in 2019, despite his limited involvement in her life and prior criminal history. Harmony, who was partially blind in one eye and had special needs, moved to Manchester, New Hampshire, to live with Adam Montgomery, his wife Kayla, and their children, marking the beginning of the final chapter of her short life. According to prosecutors, Harmony was subjected to repeated abuse inside the home. Family members later reported seeing injuries, including a black eye, and concerns were raised to child protection agencies, but no meaningful intervention followed. By late 2019, the family had been evicted and was living in their car while struggling with substance abuse. During this period, investigators said Harmony began having bathroom accidents which triggered violent outbursts from her father. One morning in December 2019, while the family was traveling to a methadone clinic, Adam Montgomery beat Harmony during a rage inside the vehicle, resulting to her death. He then concealed her body in a duffel bag and, with Kayla's assistance, hid and later destroyed her remains. Harmony's body has never been recovered. For more than 2 years, Harmony's disappearance went unnoticed by authorities until her biological mother, Crystal Sorey, grew alarmed when Adam failed to bring Harmony for a scheduled visit. After confronting him online and being blocked, she filed a missing persons report in late 2021. Adam falsely claimed Harmony was living with her mother, but investigators soon uncovered conflicting accounts. By August 2022, law enforcement publicly announced they believed Harmony had been murdered. The case triggered widespread outrage as reviews revealed failures within child protective systems that had allowed Harmony to be placed in her father's custody despite warning signs. Adam Montgomery was charged with second-degree murder, and his trial began on February 8, 2024 in Hillsborough County Superior Court. Already serving time for unrelated weapons charges, he refused to attend the proceedings. His estranged wife, Kayla Montgomery, testified against him, describing years of abuse and confirming that Harmony died after being beaten in the family vehicle. On February 22, 2024, a jury found Adam Montgomery guilty of murder and falsifying physical evidence. Harmony was later declared legally dead on March 12, 2024, at her mother's request. During sentencing, Harmony's mother delivered an emotional statement directly addressing the man she called responsible for destroying her child's life. She described Harmony as loving, kind, and full of light, saying her daughter had deserved protection but instead lived in fear and misery. She asked questions that would never be answered, wondering whether Harmony cried for her or begged for the violence to stop during her final moments. Speaking through grief and anger, she said that although he had taken Harmony physically, her daughter's spirit would live on and continue to be remembered. On May 9, 2024, Adam Montgomery was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison, to be served consecutively with the sentence he was already serving. The courtroom fell silent as the judgment closed a long legal battle, though the absence of Harmony's remains left her family without full closure. Number 20. Maxwell Stephen Anderson. On April 2, 2024, 19-year-old college student Sade Robinson was reported missing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, after failing to return home following a date the night before. That same day, a severed human leg was discovered in a nearby park, and preliminary DNA testing confirmed it belonged to her. In the days and weeks that followed, additional remains were recovered across multiple locations along Lake Michigan, revealing a crime that investigators described as one of the most disturbing acts of violence the community had ever seen. Police quickly focused on 33-year-old Maxwell Stephen Anderson, a bartender and longtime Wisconsin resident who had gone on a date with Saad at a seafood restaurant where he previously worked. Investigators arrested Anderson on April 4th, and a search of his home uncovered troubling evidence connected to the case. Although blood found on the walls was later identified as canine, prosecutors built a case showing Robinson had been murdered, dismembered, and her remains scattered across the city. Anderson, who had a prior criminal history including domestic abuse and disorderly conduct offenses, was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. The investigation shocked Milwaukee as community members organized memorials honoring Sade's life, including a pink-out gathering outside Anderson's residence and later a mural painted near a restaurant where she once worked. Friends and family described her as hard-working, compassionate, and determined. A young woman balancing college while working long hours and building a future for herself. Despite extensive searches, not all of her remains have been recovered, leaving her family without full closure and investigators without a confirmed motive for the murder. On June 6, 2025, a jury found Maxwell Anderson guilty on all counts after hearing evidence detailing the brutality of the crime. During sentencing proceedings, emotional victim impact statements filled the courtroom. Sade's sister described how her death shattered the family, saying the loss forced her to grow up overnight while living with constant fear after her sister was taken simply for trusting someone she had met. Her mother addressed the court through grief and anger, calling Anderson a monster who had planned and carried out the murder before scattering her daughter's body across Milwaukee. On August 1, 2025, Anderson was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring he would never be released. As the sentence was delivered, Sade's father spoke about the unbearable pain of losing a child in such a violent way, saying, "The hardest part was knowing his daughter's future had been stolen before it truly began." Though justice was handed down inside the courtroom, Sade Robinson's case remains a lasting scar on the community. Number 21. John DeLee. On January 28, 2023, outside the Goat Bar and Grill in Manchester, New Hampshire, 24-year-old Timothy Pouliot's night in gunfire. Inside the bar, Pouliot and 22-year-old John DeLee were with separate groups of friends when tensions grew after an argument involving members of both groups. Investigators said Pouliot had been heard claiming he could knock DeLee out with one punch, and when DeLee learned of the comment, he revealed he had a firearm and said he was not worried about a fight. After both groups were removed from the bar, surveillance video showed the confrontation continuing on the sidewalk. One of Pouliot's friends approached DeLee and a brief exchange followed before DeLee punched him. Another individual appeared holding pepper spray as tensions escalated. DeLee pulled out a handgun that briefly fell to the ground before he picked it up and prepared it, causing both groups to separate for a short moment as the situation seemed to calm. Moments later, cell phone footage captured the groups approaching each other again. Pouliot struck DeLee in the face, and seconds afterward DeLee fired multiple shots. Prosecutors later confirmed Pouliot was struck 9 times, including shots fired as he fell to the ground. Authorities ruled the death a homicide, and DeLee was arrested soon after, reportedly telling investigators he had reacted after being punched and realizing he had ruined everything. The courtroom later became a place where grief confronted the man responsible. Timothy's father stood before the judge describing the moment police knocked on his door and informed him his son had been shot and murdered. He spoke about the shock that left him emotionless at first, followed by a pain that never faded. He explained that losing a child in such violence felt like a nightmare that never ends, and that no parent should ever have to bury their own child. Family members addressed DeLee directly, speaking through tears about the life Timothy was building as a father, a son, and a man who inspired others. His parents described the memories they would never create again, the milestones stolen from their family, and the unbearable reality of watching their child's future disappear in seconds. Even while expressing forgiveness through faith, Timothy's father made clear that justice was necessary, telling the court that the decision to bring a gun into a night of drinking destroyed multiple families in a single moment. Following a 1-week trial, a jury found DeLee guilty on December 5, 2023. On March 8, 2024, he was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison for second-degree murder, along with an additional 3 to 6 years for reckless conduct with a deadly weapon. The sentencing closed a painful chapter, but for Timothy Pouliot's parents, confronting their son's murderer face-to-face in court became a moment where grief, anger, faith, and the search for justice all collided. Number 22. Kalia Marquis Everett. This is Kalia Marquis Everett, a 17-year-old from Tampa, Florida, whose name became known after 19-year-old Tyzea Christopher Williams Donaldson was fatally shot outside an apartment complex in North Tampa. On the evening of December 30, 2015, deputies responded to reports of gunfire at the Oak Bend apartment complex on University Woods Place. When officers arrived, they found Donaldson suffering from a gunshot wound to the chest. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital, but he did not survive, leaving behind a grieving family and a community searching for answers. Earlier that night, Donaldson had arranged to meet 2 men for what investigators said was a marijuana sale. Witnesses later told detectives the encounter quickly turned tense when one of the men produced a handgun and demanded the substance. Donaldson attempted to run, but a shot rang out at close range. His girlfriend and her nephew witnessed the shooting, later describing the terrifying moment the weapon was raised and fired. The suspects fled on foot, leaving chaos behind, as loved ones tried desperately to save him. In the weeks that followed, investigators pieced together the case using cell phone records, eyewitness identifications, and social media evidence. Detectives traced communications connected to the meeting and ultimately arrested Everett in early 2016. Prosecutors alleged the meeting had been planned as a robbery, though the case faced delays after a psychological evaluation initially found Everett incompetent to stand trial. In June 2018, a judge ruled he was competent, allowing the case to move forward years after Donaldson's life had been taken. When the trial began in 2021, jurors heard emotional testimony from witnesses who relived the final moments of Donaldson's life. His girlfriend took the stand and recounted the panic of calling for help while watching the man she loved collapse. The courtroom sat in silence as prosecutors described how the shooting unfolded in seconds, turning an ordinary meeting into irreversible tragedy. After deliberations, the jury found Everett guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm and aggravated assault, while rejecting the robbery charge. Sentencing day became the moment Donaldson's family finally faced him directly. His mother stood before the court struggling to condense her son's entire life into words, explaining that when her child was taken, a part of her life as well. She spoke about memories that would never grow older and dreams that would never be fulfilled. Donaldson's fiancée followed, asking questions that would likely never be answered, haunted by surviving the violence that took him away. The emotional weight in the courtroom reflected the central reality of the case: parents and loved ones confronting the person responsible for their child's death while searching for meaning in unimaginable loss. The judge ultimately sentenced Everett to 37 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Number 23. Peyton Spencer Gendron. This is Peyton Spencer Gendron, an 18-year-old from Conklin, New York, whose name became known across the world after a racially motivated mass shooting at a Tops Friendly Market store in Buffalo, New York. On the afternoon of May 14, 2022, Gendron drove more than 3 hours to a neighborhood he had deliberately chosen because of its large black population. Armed with a rifle, body armor, and a camera mounted to his helmet, he entered the supermarket shortly after 2:30 in the afternoon and opened fire on shoppers and employees going about an ordinary day. 10 people were murdered and 3 others were injured within minutes, including Ruth Whitfield, Roberta Drury, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter Jr., Geraldine Talley, Celestine Cheney, Catherine Massey, Hayward Patterson, Margus Morrison, and Pearl Young, turning a neighborhood grocery store into the scene of one of the most devastating hate-driven attacks in recent American history. Gendron had spent months preparing for the attack in isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic, consuming extremist content online and studying previous mass shootings. Investigators later uncovered a manifesto and online diary detailing his planning, his ideology, and reconnaissance trips to Buffalo. He selected the supermarket because of its predominantly black community and illegally modified his weapon to increase its capacity. Just minutes after the shooting began, responding officers surrounded the building and convinced him to surrender. He was taken into custody alive, ending the violence but leaving families across Buffalo facing unimaginable loss. The investigation revealed extensive premeditation supported by digital evidence, chat logs, and surveillance footage. Prosecutors charged him with multiple counts including first-degree murder, domestic terrorism motivated by hate, and attempted murder. In November 2022, Gendron pleaded guilty to all state charges in an effort to avoid capital punishment. On February 15, 2023, he received 11 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again walk free while federal prosecutors continued pursuing additional penalties. Sentencing day became a powerful example of parents confronting their children's murderer in court. As Gendron addressed the courtroom and apologized, emotions erupted. Catherine Massey's daughter, Karen Massey, and relatives of other victims listened as he admitted he targeted people because they were black. During the hearing, Garnell Whitfield, the son of 86-year-old victim Ruth Whitfield, rushed toward Gendron in a surge of grief and anger before officers quickly restrained him. The moment reflected the unbearable weight carried by families forced to sit only feet away from the man responsible for their loved ones' deaths. Family members then stood one after another, speaking directly to him. Relatives described parents, grandparents, and community pillars whose lives during a routine trip to the store. One grieving father told Gendron that their families never entered neighborhoods to harm others, reminding him that the victims were ordinary people who loved their children and communities. Others spoke about watching the live stream footage and the trauma of seeing final moments they could never erase. Some expressed rage, while others chose forgiveness, saying they wanted him to live long enough to remember what he had done every single day. When the judge announced the sentence of life imprisonment without parole, the courtroom fell into heavy silence. Gendron's apology did little to ease the pain felt by parents and children who would never again hear familiar voices or share ordinary moments with those they lost. For the families, confronting him face to face was not about vengeance, but about reclaiming dignity for Ruth Whitfield, Catherine Massey, Aaron Salter Jr., and the others whose lives were taken. Number 24, Javon Coulter and Valentino Pettis. Suleiman Abdul Mutakalim, a 39-year-old Navy veteran and devoted Muslim father, was walking home in South Cumminsville, Cincinnati, Ohio. On June 28, 2015, carrying White Castle food for himself and his wife when three teenagers approached him from behind. Without warning, 14-year-old Javon Coulter shot him in the back of the head. The group then took his phone, money, and the food he had just bought. Abdul Mutakalim was rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center but died 2 days later, leaving his family and community struggling to understand how a simple walk home turned fatal. Police later arrested Coulter and 17-year-old Valentino Pettis, charging both with aggravated murder and aggravated robbery. Surveillance video showed the teens taking items from Abdul Mutakalim after the shooting. Prosecutors moved to try Coulter as an adult, making him one of the youngest juveniles in Hamilton County to face a murder charge. The case quickly drew attention across the city because of the victim's military service, faith, and the young ages of those accused. Inside the courtroom, what happened next stunned everyone present. When Coulter stood before the judge and admitted his role, Abdul Mutakalim's mother, Rukia Abdul Mutakalim, rose from her seat and walked toward the teenager. Instead of anger, she embraced him and his mother in front of the court. She told him she did not hate him and said mercy was part of her faith. She reminded the courtroom that he was still a child and said revenge would not bring her son back. Many people watching broke down as grief met compassion in a moment no one expected. She continued speaking directly to the teen, explaining that taking one life destroys many connected lives. Rather than demanding punishment, she said her family wanted to help him find a better path so the violence would not repeat. The confrontation became one of the rare moments where a parent faced their child's murderer with forgiveness instead of rage. Her actions later inspired advocacy work and helped influence changes in juvenile sentencing discussions, ensuring her son's legacy would be remembered through mercy rather than hatred. Number 25, Rudy Gabriel Smith. On August 12, 2016, Ruben Sanchez was outside his family home in San Antonio, Texas, washing his car when a confrontation turned deadly. Investigators said Smith drove up to the house, sent his girlfriend to speak with Sanchez, then approached, holding 2 guns. Moments later, a single shot was fired, striking Sanchez in the head while he stood in his own driveway. Smith fled the scene, leaving the family in shock as Sanchez's father ran outside after hearing what he described as a loud pop. Sanchez's father later told the court he rushed outside and saw Smith standing over his son with a gun still in his hand. He asked what was going on, and Smith responded before leaving the scene. The murder happened in broad daylight, and the family said the memory never left them. Authorities searched for Smith for weeks until members of the U.S. Marshals Lone Star Fugitive Task Force located him at a hotel. When officers moved in to arrest him, police said Smith pretended to surrender but suddenly pulled a pistol and fired 3 shots at officers. Task force members returned fire, striking him multiple times. He survived the shootout and was taken into custody, later facing additional charges connected to firing at law enforcement. The case moved toward trial, but in a last-minute decision, Smith accepted a plea agreement and admitted responsibility for the murder. The plea allowed him to avoid the death penalty. During sentencing on January 27, 2020, the courtroom turned emotional as Ruben Sanchez's father faced the man who admitted to shooting his son. He told the judge he wanted the harshest punishment possible and said life in prison was not enough for what had been taken from their family. Speaking in court, the father described hearing the gunshot and running outside to see his son lying there. He said that moment stayed with him every day and that no sentence could restore what was lost. Prosecutors described Smith as someone who showed violence without hesitation, while the judge acknowledged the lasting damage done to the family and the community. The father's words carried anger and grief as he stood only feet away from Smith, confronting him directly before sentencing was handed down. Judge Jefferson Moore sentenced Rudy Gabriel Smith to life in prison for the murder of Ruben Sanchez and 45 years for attempted capital murder connected to the shootout with officers, with the sentences running at the same time. For the Sanchez family, confronting him in court was a moment of painful closure, a chance to speak for a son whose life in his own driveway, and to make sure his voice was heard before the courtroom doors closed on the case. Thank you for watching. Check out these other interesting clips from the channel and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.